I'm Nelda Arnold. I'm historian of the Central Christian Church of Connersville, Indiana, and I would like to share some things with you about the history of our church. The way I got this job, there was a lady by the name of Joanne Williams. She and her parents were very active in our church, and she was really interested in it, and she was the one that got these cases back here for us to store these. Now, she didn't do that, she got the money to do it. The cases store history for us, which we keep locked. We would like to share with you some of the things that are in there. Now, we have a history book that was made up the year that we celebrated our 100th anniversary of being in this building. I have something I would like to share with you that was in that. This came from a lady that says she's not sure where she got it from. History is more than dates and places. It is about men and women who have made a difference. We are truly surrounded by a cloud of witnesses that number in the thousands. Our church family is like our own families. They were here before we came, they are here now, and they will be here long after we are gone. These are the men and women who put names and faces on the history of the Central Christian Church in Connersville, and it all started in the early 1800s. That was, the lady that gave it to me does not give herself credit for that, but I'm not sure where it came from. It was, I thought, just an exceptionally good way to start out history. This started out the book that we call the History of Central Christian Church from 1833 to 2005. We have so much history here that there's no way that we're going to be able to get this done in one session. We will do what we can. I have with me Kate Turlip, our minister's wife, our pastor's wife, sorry about that, and she is going to help me. In her hand, she has, when they celebrated their 100th anniversary of the church. Now, this Christian church denomination is actually only 2 years older than our church is. That is a lot of history. And to try to put this on one little tape is impossible. So we're going to give you just a few highlights. And when you are interested in seeing more of it, you can call me and call the church, and they'll get in touch with me, and we'll do what we can to give you more history of the church. We have so many pictures over in these cabinets, and we have so many books that tell things about our church. When the church was when this building was 90 years old, there was a lady that lived here in town. She was about 12 years old, I think, when this building was built, and she stood across the church, across the street by the post office, and watched the church built. And she and some girls were there so much that the carpenters all got on first name basis with them. And at that year, Jim Orr realized that she was not going to be around for the 100th anniversary. So he insisted that we do a 90th anniversary. And in another part of the history, we have what his daughter, Carrie, did an interview with her. And it's a real neat thing. She just did it like she was a reporter and asked her questions, and it was really interesting. And it was a good thing that we did that, because by the 100th year, she had passed away. So we were really grateful for his insistence on it. We have pictures back here of way, way back. We have a historian book. We have books that has nothing but pictures. We have different items. We have plates. We have a copy of the things that, the books that we had when we had the 100th anniversary. and it tells what we done. On the 100th anniversary, we started out on Friday night with a pitch-in supper, which nobody thought anybody would show up. And this was a date that everybody was starting to come in town. And we turned out we had 150 here for a supper that nobody
Do you
was...
mean the 100th anniversary of the building?
Mhm.
Ah.
And it was a dinner that nobody thought anybody would show up for, and we had 150 show up. And then on Sunday morning, we had a breakfast. Oh, they said nobody will show up for that. Well, we had 100 show up for breakfast the next morning. Then we had the dinner on Sunday after church, after we had our celebration upstairs. We came down. Of course, we knew how many was going to be here for that, because we had to have reservations, of course, for that. And we had 263 reservations. And nobody had really thought that there would be that many show up. Every time we'd get another reservation, oh my, they was just really surprised. But they didn't realize how many people were interested in the history of this church. The church itself, the church building itself, was 100 years old back then. That was 2005. But our denomination here in Connersville is much, much older. It was here in 1833. Now, we've been in several buildings, and the history of, we have a history of the church that we wrote up until then what we could. And if anybody is interested in it, to our church members, it would be free. If we had people outside the church that had no connection with the church but would like to have a history, we would charge the cost of the paper, which would be about $1.50, which that's a good bargain, you know. And it's just really, really hard to pick out any one thing. Here I'm holding a real tiny pen. I imagine it was given for maybe like Sunday school attendance. We have no record of it, but it says Central Christian Church, SS. So that would indicate the Sunday school. Then we have a little New Testament, and it says it's for William R. Williams. Now that was Joanne, who was ahead of me on the historian. That was her dad. This was, it doesn't say who gave this to him, but it says to William from Reverend V. Schaefer, December the 25th, 1917. Now, her dad was a furniture maker. The Masonic Lodge here in town had some chairs, and they were very fancy, antique. They had been turned on a turning lathe, and they needed 2 more from what they had. He took one of those chairs up to his shop, and he made 2 more chairs to match those 3 that they had. And he wanted people to understand that there was 2 of them that were not antique. So to do that, when he got to the very bottom of the leg, there was a little place just about that big that is different on those 2 than what is on the others. And if you don't know it, you don't really see what he done. But he did a marvelous job of that. He was, to show you how dedicated he was, he had made a piece of furniture for someone for their Christmas to a relative. They wanted it delivered on Christmas Eve. And he made the furniture and delivered it. And in doing so, the way that I understood it was there was a car that backed into him and made him a cripple from there on. but he was very dedicated to his work and very good at it. And his mother, or his wife, Luetta, that's Joanne's mother, was very good friends of ours. In fact, when my mother and dad and I moved here in late August of 1947, they were one of the first ones that invited us to come visit them. And we visited them, and when it came for Thanksgiving that year, we invited them to our house for Thanksgiving dinner. And Joanne worked at McQuay Norris at the same place I did, and she was very active in the church. And one day she went home, and her mother had fallen asleep in her chair and passed away while Joanne was gone to work. But Joanne was always really active. She was in our Sunday school class. Now, our Sunday school class was a Crusaders class. And we were organized and had a little room right here next to where I'm sitting. And Roy Conrad was the first teacher of that class. And he made us a little money box. And it had two sides. One side was for the class, and one side was to go to the Sunday school. And our class still uses that little box whenever we take up an offering. And the Crusaders class has gone through a lot of Sunday school teachers. We were the first group to we had a rather big class, and we were the first group to use multiple teachers. And they said we were wasting teachers, but those three teachers would not take a class on the whole time. So one would take it the first Sunday, one would take it the second, the first one would take it the third, and the second would take it the fourth. Then we had a fifth one that would come in when there was 5 Sundays in the month. And he was a lawyer. And he got so tickled after so long a time, because invariably every one of our Sunday school lessons that he got was on law, which he thought was real interesting. We've watched a lot of changes in the church. In this book that we have, we drew diagrams of what the church looked like before and after a lot of the remodeling. And in the west end of this was a stage. And I remember one time the curtains were velvet. They were beautiful, had been beautiful, but they were really getting tattered.
But they were dusty too.
Dusty. And so somebody said to me, Nelda, you sew. If we would get you the money, would you make new curtains for there? Yeah, I would. Brought my sewing machine down here, and I can't remember now who it was, but somebody said, do you need help? And I said, yes, I do, because by the time you get all of this fabric and you're trying to move it, you know, it takes a lot of heft. So we sat in there in that other room, and we had 2 or 3 of these tables together, and we made those curtains for that stage. And then eventually it was decided that there could be better use made of what the stage, the space it took up. So they took that out. And then the latest thing that was done is they have painted everything down here. Now this sounds like we're going into maybe a different conversation, but this is history. Anything that we're doing today is going to be history tomorrow. And so you have to be careful what you do. You don't want to just do something and then be sorry of it afterwards. And right now, one of the things that I have going for me is on the door over here that goes into the Women's Fellowship Room, we are going to put 2 cork boards. And we are going to go through Wilma Offit has done a great job of keeping the history for CWF. And we're going through her pictures and put pictures on there. Well, I kept trying to think, now how can I put names on each one of those so people don't know who they are? Well, I always say that the best way I can find something out, get an answer to something, is go to bed with it on my mind.
Mhm.
And when I wake up the next morning,
Sure, you'll know the
something
answer.
has told me the answer. Now, you know I didn't come up with that during the night by myself. Somebody upstairs decided that I needed help and helped me. So I come up with the idea the other day of putting numbers on people. And maybe your name would be Kate, and I'd give you number 1. And maybe Alan would be
Sure.
Pastor Turtle, and he might be number 2.
Sure.
So then you would have a thing over here on the side that would say number 1 is Kate. Well, if you're in 6 pictures, instead of
I'm
having to
always
make
number 1. Yeah.
you're always that number. And I thought that would be a real good idea, and then we wouldn't have to worry about putting all those names
for
on
everything.
everything.
Yeah, it's a database really, is
Yeah,
what it is.
yeah, it is.
Mhm.
And so we're going to try that.
Mm.
I really don't know at this time what to go on and tell anymore.
Well, I've been dying to hear the story of the time capsule. Can you tell that
Well,
story?
I don't know whether I can tell quite all of it or not. They went to find it, and it wasn't to be found where they thought it was.
Well, they found it, because here it is.
Yes, they found it. But I'll tell you, they thought that it was outside in one of those things on the side.
Mhm.
Of the steps.
And on each side of the steps it goes in. And when they
Oh, in the knee
front.
wall on the stairs there? Mm-hmm.
and when they got into there, it wasn't there.
Well, for goodness sake.
Well, we laughed so because they told where all they had looked. And now then, I even forget where they found it. I don't know whether anybody else would remember. We'll find out though. But we did find the time capsule. And I hope that somebody, they made a new one then and put it, and I hope that somebody put a real good description of where it was then.
What was in it?
It just had, at the time, who was minister and just different things like that, you know, that might be interested to people. And you know, I really have no idea what happened to all of that. It's got to be around here someplace. So maybe we'll find that for another time to talk. Back of us, you will see all kind of books and plates, and if there's any time that you want to look at it, we keep them locked. But anytime you want to look at it and see what's in any of those books, we'll be glad to just call the church office, and they'll find somebody that is available at your time that we can give. Now, at this time, I think maybe.
Thank you very much.
I am very pleased that you and Pastor have helped us. When we came down here the first time, Kate says, we got to get that stuff out of there and get that upstairs so it don't get dirty or anything. And boy, she's grabbing it all and putting it in boxes and taping it shut. Took it upstairs and put it in his office. And he said,
Because we were painting.
and so
Not because the basement's dirty.
So now then we've got it all out of there for the time being. But we would be glad to come in and show you any of this that you might be interested in. And now then, if Pastor Allen will please come forward and turn this off, we will say good night.
It's okay, Ron will edit it out later.